Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Penn Vicarage on this Friday morning. Lovely to see you on this bright sunny day. Great to have you with us, and thank you as always for joining us for our Bible talk for today as we continue our adventure through the Psalms. Today we've got another lovely little one, Psalm 124. Just to remind you of the context, it is that there are 15 what they call songs of ascent, songs of going up. It's the day after Ascension Day, songs of going up, which go from Psalm 120 to 134. These are basically psalms what you use as part of a pilgrimage to Jerusalem. So this one's written by David. It's a Psalm of Ascent, lovely little psalm, Psalm 124. If it had not been the Lord who was on our side, let Israel now say, if it had not been the Lord who was on our side when our enemies attacked us, then they would have swallowed us up alive. When their anger was kindled against us, then the flood would have swept us away, the torrent would have gone over us, and over us would have gone the raging waters. Blessed be the Lord, who has not given us up as a prey to their teeth. We have escaped like a bird from the snare of the fowlers. The snare is broken, and we have escaped. Our help is in the name of the Lord, who made heaven and earth. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Okay. Context we don't know entirely. We know it was written by David, and it's obviously a psalm of thanks to God for deliverance. Obviously, that there's been some great problems, so to speak, to say the least, and God has rescued them from them. And this psalm is a psalm of thanksgiving to God for rescuing him and rescuing the people from their problems. Now, in the case of David, of course, this could have been many times. David had lots of enemies and had lots of problems in his life, and lots of times when he was surrounded by enemies from outside and inside, and Saul and lots of other people who rebelled against him and so on. It could have been, but Absalom and so on. But we don't know. But we do know, as I say, it's a psalm of thanksgiving. It's David here is thanking God for rescuing them from enemies. And essentially, the psalm is in kind of three bits. There's verses 1 to 5, which is like a liturgical response. I'll tell you about that in a moment. Verses 6 to 7 is like a prayer to God. And verse 8 is like a little tale for the end as well. I'll talk about that in a minute. So three sections, 1 to 5, 6 to 7, and 8 sort of stands on its own. So let's do 1 to 5 first. Well, first thing about 1 to 5, it's written like a kind of response. You can almost imagine it's written in a service book. So if it had not been the Lord who was on our side, imagine the sort of cantor or the leader of the worship saying that. Let Israel now say, ready? If it had not been the Lord who was on our side, and whenever it's attacked us, and so on and so on and so on. So it reads a bit like a kind of responsorial psalm, or a bit like a piece of liturgy, or almost like, someone's whoa, 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 and the congregation goes whoa, and back, or something like that. It reads a bit kind of like this. It's like a response. So the leader, presumably David or whoever, says, if it had not been the Lord who was on our side, let Israel now say, if it had not been the Lord, and so on and so on. It reads a bit like, as I say, a kind of bit of liturgy in church, like a response type of thing as well. That's the first bit. And in the first kind of five verses, you get you get the kind of classic if then. So in verse 1, if it had not been if it had not been the Lord on our side, Israel's side, then verse 2, if it had not been the Lord on our side, then in verse 3, then they would have swallowed us alive, then the flood would have taken us, then over us would have come the raging waters in verse 5. So verses 1 and 2, you've got if, and then verses 3 to 5, you get then. So if the Lord hadn't been with us, then such and such would have happened. That's kind of the way it is. Now, verse 1, I said, it does read a bit like a liturgy. What's also interesting, in verse 2, when it says, if the Lord had not been on our side when our enemies attacked us. Now, enemies is an interesting translation of that. As I understand it, the Hebrew is Adam, from which we get the word Adam. And it means basically people, it means mankind. So it means human agents. So it doesn't necessarily mean enemies as such, it's human agents, whatever they may be. And as I say, in David's case, that could have been someone like his son Absalom who turned against him. It could be someone like King Saul. It could be the Amalekites or whoever it may be. It could be all sorts of human enemies. But the interesting thing is, the Hebrew word is actually Adam, which means mankind. It doesn't specify enemies as such. So what it's basically saying is when human beings attacked us, when human beings came against us. So it's interesting that the word there is Adam, which from which you get the word, Adam was a prototype for mankind, and Adam means humanity or human agents. So basically it's saying these human agents, whoever they may be, and as I say, in David's case, there could have been several people, rose up against him. Then, so verse 1 talks about is like a liturgy. Verse 2 tells us it's basically human beings who are against us, and whoever they may be. And I guess in David's case, as I say, that could have been several people. Then in verse 3, 4, and 5, you kind of see what might have happened, and the imagery used is actually quite strong. Then in verse 3, they would have swallowed us up alive. Okay, when their anger was kindled against us. So these humans, whoever they may be, were obviously angry with David and angry with God's people, whatever. And he's saying, if the Lord hadn't been there for them, then they'd have been swallowed up alive. It's quite strong words, isn't it? That's how David feels would have happened, that they'd have been swallowed up if God hadn't helped them. And in verses 4 and 5, the flood would have swept us away. The torrent would have gone over us. Over us would have gone the raging waters. So the sense of being swept away. So you've got two kind of images here. What David feels would have happened if the Lord hadn't helped them. If the human beings had their way, they would have been like they would have been swallowed up alive, and second, they'd have been washed away. Like these, and don't we all feel that way sometimes? As we feel as though with the problems that we come against us can feel so big, we can feel as though we're going to get washed away, and sometimes we can feel as though we're going to get swallowed up. So that's the kind of David here using strong words to show just how bad things might have been if the Lord hadn't helped them. So that's verses 1 to 5. You've got if, then. If the Lord hadn't helped us, if the Lord hadn't been with us, then we'd have been swallowed up alive and we'd have been washed away. And that's how strongly David feels about it. Then in verses 6 and 7, then you've got a kind of prayer of thanksgiving. But blessed be God who has not given us up as a prey to their teeth. The acknowledgement here is that the people who rose against them were clearly much stronger than they were. And David clearly felt, it's just me, and these enemies are far, far bigger and more powerful than I am. Yet, the important thing is, with God on their side, then God on his side, and God on God's people's side, then actually they're all right. So the enemies that came against them were much stronger, and they must have felt as though they're going to get swallowed up alive. They may have felt as though they get washed away. They may have felt as though they might have become a prey to their teeth. Get these strong language used. But blessed be the Lord who has not given us up to it. And so, the enemies he felt were big, but actually because God was there, because God was alongside them, because God was helping them, actually they weren't given up and they lived to tell the tale and they came out winning in the end. And then in verse 8, we have this little tie-up at the end. And it's interesting, if you've heard this verse before, it's because you've heard it in Psalm 121 as well. Our help is in the name of the Lord who made heaven and earth. Again, it's quoted in Psalm 121, which we did about 3 days ago. Our help is in the name of the Lord who made heaven and earth. Other people may look to other things. Other people may look to their own resources. Other people may look to other gods, or other people may look to the hills, or other people may want to compromise, or whatever it may be. Actually, David says here, our help, despite what everybody else is, our help is in the name of the Lord, the one who made heaven and earth. So here you've got this wonderful psalm of thanksgiving. The psalmist David here is thanking God for delivering them from trouble in the past. And he's basically saying, if the Lord hadn't been on our side, then they'd have been swallowed up alive, washed away, and become prey to the teeth. And even though these enemies were big, actually, God did not give up on his people. God did not give them as a prey to their teeth. And actually they escaped and came out winning in the end. David comes to the wonderful, inevitable conclusion, which we can all say. Our help, so whatever anyone else may say, our help is in the name of the Lord who made heaven and earth. Friends, God bless you. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that makes sense. Do join us at church this weekend. Can you make a point of sharing this message with your friends? I know we're only on St Anne's at the moment. Hopefully Facebook will back onto some parts again at some point. But now we're on St Anne's, please do share this message with your friends so other people can enjoy them too. Have a lovely weekend. We'd love to see you at church. Have a great time. See you soon. Keep well, and Psalm 100.